Welcome to Windsor Teaches Latin Literature. We're going to be talking through Martial, Cures for Bad Dreams from the Educas Magic and Superstition Latin Literature. So let's have a brief summary of what's going on in this piece. So Martial is speaking directly to his friend Nisidianus, who he tells to us, the reader, that are all about him. He goes on to say that these dreams worry and disturb his mind. He's done everything from animal sacrifice to witchcraft, even hired a soothsayer in order to help him get rid of the evil eye that's been put on him in these dreams of Nisidianus. He also quips that he's been reduced to poverty through all the expensive means he's been using, hiring the soothsayer, buying heaps of frankincense, salted grain, and of course his own flocks are being used as sacrifices as well. However, by the end of the piece, he comes up with a rather novel solution. So what did the ancients believe about dreams? So they believed that gods or spirits, either good or bad, benevolent or malevolent, could speak to people through their dreams. These dreams, however, had to be interpreted by someone before you could really drill down to the main meaning of that dream. This person could either be an official priest of the Roman religion, it could be someone with priestly experience, or it could be a soothsayer, a seer, or even a witch. If the interpretation of the dream was good, there's no problem there. Just sit back and enjoy the lovely things that that dream will bring you. However, if the interpretation of that dream is bad, then the person who has had the dream, or the person who is the subject of the dream rather, will have to go through some various different rituals in order to appease the god or spirit that has cast the evil eye on them. However, it is worth mentioning that the interpretation of dreams was subjective, and you have to wonder about the agenda of the interpreter. What is it that they want out of the situation, and would it be possible for that person to engineer the interpretation of the dream in order to achieve something for themselves? So what about the author, Martial himself? It's difficult to know the message of the piece or what he's trying to get at without knowing some information about the writer himself. So here we have Marcus Valerius Martialis, otherwise known as Martial. He wrote epigrams with short satirical poems with a witty and pithy ending. We're to believe that nothing we read here should be taken at face value, and there is some sort of undercurrent of sarcasm that Martial is using here in order to make some sort of statement about religion or superstition as a whole. In fact, it might even help to imagine Martial a little bit more like this. So this epigram is only 8 lines long, so we can afford to look at each line in isolation and figure out what's going on in each one, although in future pieces of literature we may very well have to cherry pick the key quotes and the key messages. So a few notes before we begin on the analysis. Anything highlighted in red is something to do with the word order. Roman poets were very big on shifting around the word order in order to emphasize certain things or to de-emphasize certain things as well, by putting words to the beginning or the end of the sentence respectively. Highlighted in green is going to be content, use of vocabulary. So anything to do with the choice of words and why they have chosen those words to express the idea that they are expressing. Blue is anything to do with sound, so things like repetition, alliteration, sibilance, assonance. All of these things contribute to the sound, and the sound of the words put across a certain meaning as well. And finally, in purple, anything to do with literary devices, so things like anaphora, polyptoton, or any of these slightly more complex words that we talk about in Roman literature that I will take you through bit by bit. So let's look at the first line of Martial now. Semper mane mihi de me mera somnia naras, which means you always tell me your entire dream about me in the morning, or about myself in the morning. You'll notice that semper, the word for always, has been promoted to the front of the line. This is something called emphatic position. Martial has put the word semper at the beginning in order to emphasize the frequency with which Nisidianus tells him his dreams about himself. You'll notice also this alliterative sound, mane mihi de me mera, which is alliterative in order to, again, try to emphasize the frequency that Nisidianus is telling his dreams. You'll also notice that there are lots of words that mean me in there. Well, two to be precise, mihi and me, which are placed very closely together, which in my mind at least gives an air of the fact that it's very personal to Martial, these dreams. Nisidianus is very detached from the consequences of his dreams. He's only the one having them, whereas Marshall is the one that is experiencing the fallout from them. After talking about how frequently Nisidianus tells him about his dreams, he goes on to say, Quae moveant animum sollicitentque meum, which move and disturb my soul. I think this is all a use of content and vocabulary there, highlighted in green, because it's a very poetic and very grandiose way of saying that these things that Nisidianus is dreaming worry me, which move and disturb my soul. A very grandiose use of language there, perhaps ironically speaking. Iam prior ad faecem set et haec vindemia venit. Last year's wine is down to the dregs, and now this year's vintage too. So the emphatic position of vindemia, meaning vintage, towards the end of the sentence, adds a bit of suspense to the line. There are a few different interpretations of this. Either Marshall himself has drunk all the wine due to the stress, or the wine has been used in ritual sacrifices, or the soothsayer that he has hired, that we're going to hear of in the next line, is the one who has drunk it all. There is a long-standing and very negative stereotype of soothsayers being mostly female and old, and also being very, very fond of wine and being drunks as well. Exorat noctes dum mihi saga tuas, while the soothsayer soothes your nights for me. So he's speaking again directly to Nisidianus. Again, Marshall loves using emphatic position. He puts soothes, exorat, at the beginning of the line, and he separates noctes from tuas. So hyperbaton is the separation of the noun, noctes, nights, from the adjective that describes it, tuas, yours. Perhaps the reason for this is that Marshall is trying to create some sort of division, some sort of barrier between Nisidianus, the one having the dreams, and himself, the one who has to live with the consequences of them. Next, consumsi salsasque mollas et turis acervos. I have used up all the salted grain and heaps of frankincense. So the fact that he has used emphatic position, consumsi, I've used up at the beginning of the line. And we have the word choice of turis acervos, heaps of frankincense, implies a huge quantity. Salted grain was used in ritual sacrifice, and frankincense was used as a kind of incense in rituals as well. Both of which are very, very expensive, frankincense more so than the salted grain, and the fact that he has bought heaps of it implies that he has been reduced to poverty by his need to escape the evil eye put on him by the dreams of Nisidianus. So not only has Marshall used up all the salted grain and bought heaps of frankincense, he goes on to say, Decrevere greges dum cadit agna frequens. My flocks have decreased while the lambs fall in large numbers. So decrevere, the fact that it is emphatic position of have decreased at the beginning of the line, followed closely by greges, the flocks. Perhaps I'm being fanciful as well, but I think the decrevere greges, the similar E sounds, represents a form of assonance there, and perhaps this is intended by Marshall, or perhaps this is my personal analysis, is that to me it sounds like a lot of those E sounds sounds like the bleating of the sheep in order to give us kind of a sonic impression of those lambs that he is mentioning falling in large numbers. Marshall then goes on to talk about other things that he's lost due to this evil eye from Nisidianus' dream. Not only has he lost his salted grain, spent lots of money on frankincense and his lambs falling in large numbers, he goes on to say, non porcus, non hortis aves, non ova supersunt. No pig, nor hen, nor egg survives. It's probably no coincidence as well that we start with a large animal, a pig, a porcus, then non hortis aves, then hen, and then egg, going down in size of creature. This is no coincidence. It's probably Marshall trying to emphasize just how much he's lost. Not even a pig, not even a hen, not even an egg survives. So we've got the repetition of the non here to emphasize the negative. So non, non, non. We also find that that is in a list of 3, which in linguistic terms is called a tricolon. What's also interesting, here's what I just mentioned, is that the animals become smaller as the sentence continues. And the reason for that is sort of a triple threat of exaggeration, that not even an egg survives. So now in the final line of his epigram, we're to expect something witty or pithy or sarcastic or dry for Marshall to finish off with. And he does not disappoint. He says, "Aut vigila, aut dormi nasidiane tibi." So this is him trying to come up with a solution for all of these things that he's experiencing and Nasidianus' dreams. He whittles it down to 2 options despite many other options being available, although those options don't seem to have worked. Either stay awake, Nasidianus, or keep your sleeping to yourself, or keep your dreams to yourself is another way you may want to translate that. So aut vigila, aut dormi, he's whittled it down to 2 options, and this is actually still existent in Italian today. When you say you gave someone an out or an out, it means you've given them a choice between 2 difficult options. So whittles it down to 2 options despite others being available, and Tibi emphatically positioned towards the end of the line. All of these things has happened due to Nisidianus and his dreams, and so Marshall has befallen a great deal of hardship, and he also quips that he's been reduced to poverty. So perhaps in putting Tibi, referring to Nisidianus at the end of the line, is sort of a final insult to Nisidianus for having brought this upon him.